Hi, it's Cindy. Now, this is video number 2 in the series that I'm doing about sexual immorality. I've had a lot of people asking me to do this, and I hope I'm coming to you in a spirit of truth and a spirit of love. But these are some hard lessons. So I think for today, what we will start out with is kind of defining sexual addiction. I've done a lot of research over the years, and I want to give credit to Dr. Doug Weiss from Colorado Springs with Heart to Heart Ministries. I actually saw him on Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil and I agree on this one, that Dr. Doug Weiss is the premier counselor, psychologist, training, equipping center, and addiction rehab center in the nation. I actually called them at one time and asked them, how could someone get some help? And they pretty much said there was no counselor that was trained properly in the whole southern United States. So I hope since then, since it's been a dozen years, they have gotten more trained and equipped. That's not to say that there aren't people out there that are trying really hard, but I believe that Dr. Doug Weiss has a really great program. So a lot of what I'm giving you today comes from him. You can, of course, go to Heart to Heart Ministries or sexaddict.com online and find out anything you'd like to know. You can even pay for a free session of counseling to find out if you really are in trouble with your spouse, or you can take the online test for free, which is find out if you're a sex addict. They also have a great program for spouses of sex addicts, which is invaluable to those who are living in this torturous hell with the one they love the most. So let's start in. Let me turn my worship down just a wee bit. I love it, but I don't want it to drown me out while I'm teaching. So I want to start out with, awake, awake, oh sleeper, awake. This problem, sexual addiction, is not just about you, all right? Secret sins and hidden shame, these things are very important, and the Bible, which we're going to get into in great detail in subsequent videos, is, look at this, I bookmarked all these right here, and I did that in just 15 minutes. The Holy Spirit was leading me through the scriptures of what to say. But I really believe defining the secret sin, defining the hidden shame is important. Do you realize that 10% of the men in our life deal with this issue? What they really are is dopamine addicts. All right, let me define that. So dopamine is the chemical in your brain which gives you that feel-good feeling, that love feeling, that rush of euphoria. Dopamine is a chemical in your brain that your body cannot live without. So if you are addicted to dopamine, then it's a real problem because you're addicted to your own body chemistry. Unlike heroin or cocaine or other very addictive drugs, you can't live without dopamine. So this is something we have to learn to manage and be delivered from so that we can live healthy lives. Also, when a person orgasms, they get that dopamine rush. And so that's where it connects into the sexual addiction. All right, let's talk about the different types of sexual addiction. One is the biological sex addict. That's what I was just describing to you. They are literally addicted to their own brain chemistry. Well, how does this happen? Well, quite frankly, excessive masturbation to pornography or fantasy. Because remember, pornography can come in many different forms. It can come in the form of video or still shots, magazines, video chats, live interactions online, live interactions in person in strip clubs. It can come through romance novels, or even just, a magazine on the grocery store stand can have way too much for most people to handle, like Cosmopolitan and some of the others. Women tend to be emotionally addicted, and then it leads into fantasy, and it leads into pornography addiction. Men, on the other hand, have many different types. Well, let's just say everyone has different types of sex addiction. So the first one is biological, all right? The second one is a psychological sex addict. All right, what does that mean? Well, basically, this particular addiction is caused by abandonment, neglect as a child, abuse, and they medicate their pain with pornography. Once again, the dopamine rush gives them a feeling of euphoria. The third kind is the spiritual sex addict. Well, how can someone be addicted spiritually, you might say? Well, the only one worthy of addiction in our case is Jesus. You can be addicted to Jesus, but not sex. It will destroy your life. So spiritual addiction is it's also a fantasy. So God has placed this hole in each one of us as human beings on the earth. He did it on purpose. It makes us long for love. It makes us long for touch, long for that dopamine rush. Now, why did God do this? Because He is pure love. He is pure intimacy, and He wants to draw you to Himself. Whereas false intimacy, which is pornography and sex addiction, and many other levels, is the counterfeit to what is true intimacy. You know, I realize that the thing that most people want more than anything who are sex addicts is a true sexual loving relationship with someone they adore and who adores them. And what I'm here to tell you is you're looking for love in all the wrong places, and it's just tormenting you, and quite frankly, it may be sending you to hell. It's also destroying your relationships, which I think you already know. So God has placed in us this spiritual hole. So if a sex addict is going out looking to fill that hole with the wrong kind of love, that's spiritual sex addiction. Number 4, trauma-based addiction. And 80% of sex addicts come into this category. What does that mean? Well, trauma is if they had sexual abuse. It could be as a child, it could be as an adult. Just any sexual abuse is very traumatic. Whether it's manipulation or whether it's actual rape or whether it's verbal or emotional, it can be very traumatic. So 80% are based on trauma, and many times the sex addict will reenact in a sort of very sick sense what happened to them, because your body responds to physical pleasure even though you knew it was wrong, and you become a little twisted in your thoughts, and so you think that's the only way you can be loved. So many girls who were raped or date raped, sexually molested as children, they end up becoming very promiscuous. They're sleeping around all over everywhere. Many men end up becoming LGBT community, men and women, because they were spiritually wounded, sexually wounded. And so they just throw themselves into this lifestyle because that's the only love they've ever known. As perverted and as wicked as it was, it brought a little bit of pleasure because of the dopamine. And they literally are running around trying to find love in any way they can and getting re-wounded over and over and over. It's quite traumatic. The 5th type is intimacy anorexia. Now, this is a very serious type, and it's somewhat of a new term. It came out in the 90s to be a sexual anorexic. 29% of all sex addicts have this, and it's actually a combination between sexual addiction and sexual anorexia. Now, let me explain. If you have a normal human being, we are all a mix of good and bad in our character and in our desires and who we are. We are human beings, and we all need to work on our character and becoming better people. But if you are a sexual anorexic / sex addict, you have 2 boxes. You have a bad boy box and you have a good boy box. And these boxes do not link. There is not a mixture of good and bad. You are either or. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You know, he was either or. You're a bad boy or you're a good boy. And you could be a really great person. You could be a person that's a preacher. You could be someone who's a wonderful father and someone who actually brings flowers and says nice things to your spouse when you're in your good boy box. But when you're in your bad boy box, You give yourself permission to do anything wicked and evil that you choose. And this is where the deliverance is needed. You know, here's a good example. Say a man who is a sexual anorexic sex addict, he comes home from his wonderful job where everybody has been telling him how great he is at his job and what a wonderful boss he is, and he might even be a pastor. And they've been, oh, pastor, we love your sermons, and that counseling you gave me last week was so great. So he's in his good boy box at home, at work, but then he comes home and he's feeling great. You know, I can't wait to see my family. And all of a sudden, the spouse, the wife says, you know, you forgot to take out the trash yesterday, and it's really stinky. Can you take out the trash now? Well, a sexual anorexic and a sexual addict will react differently than just a normal mixture of good and bad. Yeah, a normal man might get angry and say, oh, that woman, you know, he'll keep it to himself. He's like, I'm sorry, I'll take it out right away. I know the house is stinking. Why can't she just take it out herself? You know, blah, 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 blah. That's kind of a normal bad reaction. A good man was like, oh, honey, I'm sorry, I love you. Let me get that right away. That's a good man, girl. A bad boy in his bad boy box will throw a fit of rage. He might even throw the trash can or the person, the spouse, across the room. He might get so angry that his rage just bubbles out and he never takes out the trash. And the wife says, oh my gosh, what just happened? I don't understand. And he slams the door and walks out, and now she's crying. She's praying even. God, what happened? What did I say? What was wrong? I don't understand. I just asked him to take out the trash. She's devastated. The things that he said to her in his rage pierced her heart, pierced her mind, brought up her wounds, her weaknesses, everything that hurt her. And so an hour or two goes by, and he comes back. Don't even want to get into what he was doing, but I can promise you he was in his bad boy box, because that rage, you know, and he's telling himself, who can live with a woman like that? I need this. I need my fix, okay? If you're a heroin addict, you're going to go get a fix of heroin. If you're a sex addict, you're going to go get a fix of sex, wherever that is, whether it's with real human beings and hookers or whether it's with pornography. You know, a sex addict doesn't even need to actually have it around him, though it's right there on their phone every minute of every day, easily accessible now, unlike 25, 30 years ago. It's right there and it's easy to get. But a sex addict can recall it in their mind. They can just close their eyes and picture all those things going like a broken record over and over and over in their mind. A woman who's a sex addict and a sexual anorexic can just, you know, go into the fantasy novel. Oh God, I wish my husband was like that. And the husband's going, just like Oprah said. You come home from work and she wants you to be that man that's on the front of the novel. You know, that's not reality. That's fantasy. And it destroys people's hearts and lives. Now, when the spouse comes back and he's feeling good now because he's had his fix, normally the woman is laying on the couch, devastated, depressed, big red eyes, you know, scared actually that he's come home, and the last thing she wants to do is talk about it. And the last thing he wants to do is talk about it. So he goes to his room, she stays on the couch. She may be flipping through the channels trying to watch some preacher, or going to YouTube trying to find Mama CC to help her get some understanding and clarity about what just happened. That's what my grandkids call me, a CC. You can too, it's all right. But it's a devastating thing, and as I share this with you, I know you understand this is a pattern that is in many, many relationships, in many marriages, in many families. And it's not just about the addiction. It affects everybody. So now, the next thing in the sexual anorexic, bad boy, good boy situation is, he's left his bad boy box because he's got his fix. Now he's in his good boy box. He gave himself permission to do whatever he wanted to feel better, though devastating everyone around him. And now he's back in his good boy box. And he may come in with flowers, just like any abusive person. He may say, I'm so sorry, honey. I love you. It's going to be all right. Yeah, I lost my temper. He doesn't ever own up to the fact that the sex addiction is what's causing his rages. But now he feels good, and he can't understand why the wife is devastated. He has no understanding. And if he ever told her, she would really be more devastated than she is, so he hides it. You know, that's that secret sin, that hidden shame. And when he's in his good boy box, he is actually neglecting his wife. That's the anorexic part. He can't bring himself to have healthy, intimate sex with his wife. So he's trying to be good, and he, in a perverted way, associates sex with his bad boy box. So when he's in his good boy box, he's neglecting her emotionally, mentally, and definitely physically. Now, that's not to say that sex addicts never have sex with their spouses. They do. But generally, it's long in between times, you know, a month, sometimes 6 months, you know. It doesn't really matter the length of time since you've had an intimate sex with your spouse. What's really happening is he's reliving these sex acts in his brain while he's so-called making love to you. And you feel it. If you're a spiritual person, you feel it. It's like there's a wall. It's like you think your husband's anorexic. It's like, I can't get to him emotionally. What is this? And you're just so grateful for any attention that you ignore those red flags. But I promise you, this is not God's plan for your life, for your husband, for you, or your marriage. That's why Mama Cece is here to help you. So the sixth kind of sex addict is a mood disorder sex addict. About 28% of sex addicts are all into depression. They're very depressed people. You know, most of the addictions are a combination of these. Like, you can totally have a sexual addict that's anorexic and also acting out his sex addiction by sleeping with hookers. You can also have someone who is psychologically and dopamine addicted, you know, biologically. As a matter of fact, it kind of progresses. I think that it's safe to say that most people, most young men, become sex addicts to pornography in their teenage years, or because of trauma in their younger years. And it progresses. You know, pornography addictions progress until what got you off doesn't get you off anymore. And you have to get a little more violent, or a little more perverted, or a little more strange. Or now it's not just you and your pornography, but you're going to reach out to prostitutes, or you're going to go to strip clubs and get them to dance on your lap. You know, you think you're just fulfilling that desire, but you're progressing to a stronghold, to a debased mind. You are actually opening yourself up to demonic influence. Serious demonic influence. You know, one time I saw something on a computer by accident, and that thing haunted me. Just that one flash before I closed it off real quick, it haunted me for months. And even now, if I think hard enough about it, it'll come back up in my mind. You know, these things have a demonic stronghold on them that lures with a seducing spirit of lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. You want to hide it. These are the three types of sin, and Satan is just wooing you in to destroy you. He doesn't care anything about your desires or your lack of love in your life. He wants to addict you, he wants to possess you, and he wants to destroy, to kill, steal, and destroy your life. Well, I think that's enough for this video. I love you guys. I know this was hard. I'm just defining it. And I'm going to define it again in video number 3. We're going to go into some symptoms of sex addicts. Love you guys. Get excited. Deliverance is on its way.